Property Centre worker, and today we're looking at transforming, and Graham is going to tell us a little bit about how CAP does just that. So welcome, Graham.
Right, I'm on now. So, you might be thinking, why are we having a CAP celebration on Remembrance Sunday? One seems quite sombre, one seems up there. But I was thinking about, all those images we get this time of year of the men going off to war on the trains and leaving. But 100 years ago, Clitheroe would be a mill town, and there would be so many of the men from the town would be going off to war. The Second World War is when the women would be taking over the work. And we can talk now about maybe they were misguided, maybe there's whole politics behind the war and all these things we know. But the basic was that people were giving their lives for a hope and a future and against oppression. And sometimes we can lock on to certain scriptures and we can say there will always be wars and rumours about wars. And in the same way we can say there will always be poverty. Jesus said at one point, the poor will always be with you. If we take that out of context, we could say, well, we don't need to do anything about war, and we don't need to do anything about poverty. But there's so much more in the prophets, Isaiah, Amos, Micah. There's so much more that Jesus said about looking after the poor and having a heart for the poor. So today we are going to celebrate the work of CAP locally and nationally, and we're going to look at that in our context today. So I'm going to start just with a quick thank you from the founder of CAP, John Kirby. We've been a CAP, involved with CAP in this church for 8 years now. So we're just going to hear from John before we start.
Hi there, my name is John Kirby, and together with Lizzie, we have the huge privilege of being the founders of Christians Against Poverty. I want to say a huge thank you to you and your church for partnering with CAP to change lives in your community. Listen, CAP would not exist without churches like you. You are bringing hope into your community, friendship and the love of God, and of course the eternal good news of Christ into your communities. For us, it always has been and always will be through the church. Whether you have partnered with us for just a few months or maybe tens of years, you are making a big difference. You are changing lives, and today you're going to find out a little bit about what's going on in your church. You're going to hear some inspiring stories from people who have had their lives transformed by your church. Listen, CAP is a movement that is growing across the UK, working with more and more churches just like you. And we are excited about all we've seen this year. And we are so expectant on what God can do with a bunch of ordinary people who get behind a vision given by God, who believe audaciously that the church should be at the forefront of social change and that Christians should ensure they share the good news of Jesus and see poor lives change. Thank you for all you've done, and thank you for joining in.
So, thank you to you from John and the whole CAP organisation. I couldn't do what I'm doing, the Befrienders couldn't do what they're doing without us supporting and being involved as a whole church. So we're going to look today briefly at the issue of poverty. We're going to look at what I've called an intervention rather than a solution. CAP is not a solution to poverty, it doesn't pretend to be, but it's helping people in that situation. And we're going to look at the agents of transformation, that is you, in different ways. So, first of all, looking at poverty in the UK, it's estimated that 1.5 million people live in what is called destitution, and another 14.3 million live in poverty. That is over 20% of the UK population. Now that means that parents are going to be not feeding themselves because they need to feed the children. It means that elderly people don't put the heating on because they worry about the bills that will be covered. It means that people are battling lots of health problems, including mental health problems, and at the same time they've got people at the door or on the phone chasing them because of their debts, just adding to the problem. Try and visualise that. Can anybody tell me, there'll be a prize for this if you get it right, how many people live in the Ribble Valley? I know. Julie? 80,000? Any advance, up or down? 100,000? 50? 50. Right, Chaz is the nearest, so Chaz gets a trolley coin for cap money for his. How many people can tell me how many are in the whole of Lancashire? That doesn't include Manchester and all those places. Lancashire. Yeah, there's another prize. So you might as well have a guess. 300,000? Up, down? 5 million. We're almost the population of Scotland now. Any advance? 150,000?
Someone's just Googled it.
Who said 1.2 million? That lady gets a prize. Was it you, Pam? Oh, it was Jonathan. Nearly. Apologies to the people online if I've walked off screen. We know you're there, Malcolm, Mavis, Lemuel, various other people. Thank you for watching us online as well. Yes, it's 1.2 million in Lancashire. So even if you imagine all the people in Lancashire, even more than that in the country are destitute. And if you think 14 million, 20% of the population are in poverty. What is poverty? There are different definitions of poverty. You might when you think about poverty, you might picture this. You think of a third world country where people are really existing in what we all think of as poverty. So the World Bank defines it as it's hunger, it's lack of shelter, it's being sick and not able to see a doctor, it's not having access to school, not being able to read, it's not having a job, fear for the future, living one day at a time. It's losing a child to preventable illness through things like unclean water. And it's feeling powerless, a lack of representation or freedom. So that's probably what we think of poverty when we're thinking about maybe Tier Fund, other organisations like that, and we're very aware of it. So when we look at the Ribble Valley, are we in poverty? We have food festivals, we have music festivals, we've got shops that are fairly full, we've got cafes, wonderful scenery, everything else. Apparently, Ribble Valley has been named recently as one of the happiest places to live. But that masks what goes on. We are not all. It is a great place to live. We probably are more affluent than our neighbours like Blackburn and Burnley. But within that, there are problems. As I said earlier on, we're historically a market town and a mill town. The mills have all gone. They've been replaced for a lot of people by low-level jobs. So factory jobs, care work, retail, hospitality, other sectors like that. There's a high proportion still of rented properties in the town rather than owner-occupied. And the rents and mortgages are becoming more expensive to be able to afford. So we're not talking about poverty in the third world terms, absolute poverty. We are talking about relative poverty. But what does that look like? If we go to the next screen. The Joseph Rowntree Foundation, who do a lot of work in this area, they've said that it's called the minimum income level, income standard. If you're living above that, on or above that, you have a reasonable standard of living. If you're below that, or just below that, you might be getting by day to day, but you're under pressure. You find it difficult to manage other costs. So it's when the car breaks down, when the roof leaks, when you've got a funeral, when you've got a period off work, all those things can throw you into struggling with your finances. And I've been surprised actually how many of the people I see, if they are on, they don't get sick pay. Now, you would think that was legal. There was laws against that, but so many people now are on contracts where, because they get 0 hours contracts paid by the hour, they don't necessarily get sick pay. Below that is just not enough income. You're falling substantially short of a decent standard of living, and you have a high chance of not meeting your needs. And then at the bottom, destitution. You really cannot afford to eat, to keep clean, or to stay warm and dry. Now, most of the people I see as CAP clients are in those middle two categories. There are some who are on the top. I don't think I've seen any yet who are on the bottom. I think Salvation and Army others pick those up a lot more. And it was great yesterday to see, if anybody didn't know about it, the Salvation Army's new building is now open and commissioned, and it's really good to see what they're going to be doing in the town. So, what does God say about all of this? We need to hear God's heart for the poor, and we need to respond. So I'm going to ask Anne, who's one of our befrienders, if she can read to us from Isaiah 6, verses 1 to 8.
For those of you with church Bibles, it can be found on page 690. In the year that King Uzziah died, I saw the Lord sitting on a throne, high and exalted, and the train of his robe filled the temple. Above him were seraphs, each with 6 wings. With 2 wings they covered their faces, with 2 they covered their feet, and with 2 they were flying. And they were calling to one another, Holy, holy, holy is the Lord Almighty, and the whole earth is full of his glory. At the sound of their voices, the doorposts and the thresholds shook, and the temple was filled with smoke. Woe to me, I cried, for I am a man of unclean lips, and I live among a people of unclean lips, and my eyes have seen the King, the Almighty, the Lord Almighty. Then one of the seraphs flew to me with a live coal in his hand, which he had taken with tongs from the altar, and with it he touched my mouth and said, See, this has touched your lips. Your guilt is taken away, and your sin atoned for. Then I heard the voice of the Lord saying, Whom shall I send, and who will go for us? And I said, Here am I, send me. This is the word of the Lord.
So this session today is part of our series on connecting, changing and transforming. And we know that we are called to a relationship with God. It's by connecting with God first of all that we come into relationship with him, we capture his heart. It is not just about us all doing for God. We need to connect with God first. So as some people, I think last week, went to the new academy sessions, there are lots of other ways we've been talking about really connecting our hearts with God. But what's interesting in this passage is that Isaiah has this amazing revelation of God. He has this real experience where he is touched by God, where he's cleansed. But the result is that God says, I need somebody, I need people to go for me, to be my voice to the world. And Isaiah's response is, Here am I, send me. So out of worship, out of relationship, come our response to poverty, to so many other issues in the world. And Christians have responded over the centuries. We just have to think about Francis of Assisi, Dr. Bernardo, George Mueller in children's homes, the Salvation Army, things like Tear Fund today, lots of different organisations that have come from the heart of Christians to make a difference in this world. And what we're going to look at today is CAP, Christians Against Poverty. And that was the response of one man, John Kirby. He founded CAP in 1996 when he became a Christian and himself had been in debt and worked in the finance industry. That has expanded an organisation now that is working in the UK, New Zealand, Australia, Canada, and this year it started in the United States. And it's there for Christians to be involved in helping transform the lives of people who are affected by debt. CAP's primary focus is always on relief and debt help. But since then, they have developed other ministries in related areas. So they now run the CAP Money course, which we'll be talking about shortly, CAP Life Skills, which is a group course for helping people recover their self-esteem, look at things like cooking, job applications, etc. There are CAP Job Clubs and CAP Fresh Start, which is a group for people with addictions. So lots of ways that CAP has expanded, but all related to really bringing hope to people who've been struggling. Now, as you know, our CAP Debt Centre was started by Pam, at the back there. Give us a wave, Pam. Yeah. In November 2011, so 8 years ago. And I took over the management of the centre last year. And it's been great to see how things have been developing in the last year. So we've 50% more clients than last year. We've relaunched CAP Money. We've started work in local schools. And we've even been selected as the Charity of the Year for fundraising by our local WI group. So I'm hoping next January I'll be going and picking one of these big cheques up, which can support CAP. Thinking about the future, one of the next stages I would love to do would be to start the CAP Life Skills course. As I say, this goes beyond just budgeting to really helping people who've been struggling to really get a new position and move on in the future. So, for example, I've been talking to Caroline in the 180 project about how that could link for the ex-prisoners and people dealing with addictions that she's working with. But, like anything, we will need a resource. We will need people who can run that course, who people have got a heart for. So, if that's something you'd like to know more about, do talk to me. Right. One of the things we've been doing this year is relaunching what is called CAP Money. Will Weston, is Will here today? There. Will and Andrew used to run this at the community church several years ago. It hasn't run for the last few years, but I really wanted to relaunch it because it's one thing to work with people on their budget and to give them a kind of solution for getting out of debt. It's another thing to really learn budgeting skills. You were taught how to handle money at school. I don't see any hands, I don't think. So anything you do, you've just acquired over the year. And some of you, I'm sure, will be much better at it than others. We will all have different ways of managing our bank accounts, our finances, experience debt. Some of us may have managed to stay out of it. But CAP Money is a 3-session course which we can run in different ways. We have piloted it with what we call our bread group, which is our 1830s group. And I think they found that really helpful. And then we're starting our first public course next Tuesday, and we're already full. We've got 14 people signed up, and I'm really looking forward to that course. In the future, I would love it if we could run it for the community, so for things like parent groups, parents of toddler groups, local nurseries, parents of school. We could run youth and kids versions, so hopefully getting into St James School, into some of the secondary schools. And as a kind of precursor to that, one of the really good things this year was being involved through David and the Grand in St Augustine's, I've got to say it right, St Augustine's Missions Week. So we did 9 sessions with some of the classes in years 7, 8 and 9, so that's 11 to 13-year-olds, just talking about CAP, the work of CAP, why Christians are involved, and giving them a bit of a budgeting exercise. And that hopefully will lead to running in that school. We now have 4 CAP Money coaches. We would love more, particularly people who are available during the day. So again, if you're interested, do talk to me. So let's move on to CAP Debt Help. Next slide, thank you. Yeah, we're not going to show the video quite yet. I could give you lots of statistics, but statistics kind of disguise what's really behind them. I will tell you, if you take the last 25 cases I've dealt with, that's a very bold figure, 25 cases. That includes 35 adults, 19 primary children, 10 secondary children. So 64 people in all that are all affected in some way by death. The households include single adults, couples with no children, couples with 1 to 4 children I've had, and probably the biggest group is single parents with children. The total debt, the clients who are on a debt pathway now, is £227,000. So just imagine that. Say some will be as low as 3,000 throwing, some will 30,000, 40,000 or more. But if you've got very low income, even 3,000 is a big hurdle to deal with. And if they accept what CAP suggests is the best plan for them, they will either be on a debt repayment plan over a few years, or they'll be accepting some form of insolvency. So that's things like debt relief order or bankruptcy. These are one of the areas I do really appreciate your prayer for, because when you're offered a solution by CAP, even if it's the best one for you, prepared by the expert, it can be really difficult to swallow. And particularly people struggle. The option is insolvency and bankruptcy. But that may well be the best way for them. So I'd appreciate your prayers there. Right, I would like to tell you some stories. What I can't do today, particularly because we're online, is I cannot give you lots of detail. But I'm going to give you some examples. We're going to start with a video. If we go back one, Andy. We're going to start with a video that's been prepared by CAP nationally, and it tells you Tina's story. But Tina is not untypical of the clients that I see locally. And then I'll go on to give you some examples of what we meet as we go through the doors in the clinical. Thanks, if you could play the video.
What situation I was in, to walk past the house. No, you wouldn't know. The only thing you think is, oh, that person keeps their curtains closed. You don't know what goes on behind closed doors. The one thing I didn't want was to be judged. You put a front on to people. I won't have a cup of tea because I've only got a quarter of a pint of milk that's got to last me a week. You make excuses. Oh, the boiler's not working today, so I can't put the heating on, sorry. Oh, the bulbs have blown, sorry. I'd go around and take the bulbs out. My bedtime became sort of 4 or 5 o'clock in the evening because I couldn't read by the lights I had, or do my cross stitch or anything like that. Collect the post once in a blue moon, big pile of letters, and we want this, we want this, we want this. You can't have it, there's just nothing left. You don't see an end. And as much as people tell you there's an end, there isn't. You're living, not day to day, I was living minute to minute. And the only answer I could see was, if I'm not on this earth, you can't get anything from me.
Over 1.5 million people haven't got enough food to eat, heating for their home, or even a place to call their home. Right here, right now in the UK. It is in every community, often hidden behind closed doors. I know what it's like to not have enough to feed your children. I know what it's like to have to leave home. And that's why I started CAP 23 years ago. We offer award-winning debt counselling. We have job clubs. And we offer courses that help people with life and dependencies. Every one of our life-transforming services is run in partnership with a local church just like yours. Whenever CAP partner with local churches, lives are transformed and poverty is relieved. Every year together, tens of thousands of lives are touched by the work of CAP and the local church. But most importantly, around 1,000 people choose to respond to Jesus. On her own, Tina had absolutely no chance of resolving her debt situation. But once the local church and CAP were on the scene, things began to change dramatically.
It was a relief when Ruth came round because for once it was someone that wanted to listen to me, that wasn't getting paid to listen to me. And I sobbed. I broke my heart. She then said, right, we're going to help you here. They will sort you a budget out that gives you money that I can go. I could open the post and just put it in an envelope and send it to Ruth, or keep it for her next visit. Such a relief to be able to get up in the morning and open your blinds and the curtains and you see sunlight instead of a dark room. You know, and I remember going to church after I went debt. You right? Yep. I went debt free the other day. You know, and everyone was genuinely pleased that I'd done it as well. And through the coach journey, I started going to my local Baptist church, and it started restoring my faith. I got baptised, and it was like a piece of my wall that I put up came down, but also another weight got lifted with the support of my father and the support of the churches and the people around me. I can now start rebuilding my life.
Will you join over 30,000 other people who, just like you, believe that the church should be involved in its community and be at the forefront of social change? Who, like you, believe that poverty should be relieved and people should be given a chance to live again? And also, Jesus should be at the heart of all we do, that we should share the good news with the people that we help. Will you today join those, and together we can make a massive difference? £10 a month, 2 calls answered, everything starts with a call. Will you be the bringers of hope in lives?
And you already give in ways to CAP. As a church, we give towards CAP to support me, to support the work of CAP at headquarters, and I know that a lot of people are already what we call life changers. If anybody would like to be a life changer, our forms outside in the foyer, and you can speak to me afterwards. But you saw an example there of a client story, how she was struggling beforehand, that her illnesses were making it much worse. She was feeling very isolated, and then the church came in, CAP came in, and brought God to her and brought a debt solution. So when I get a contact from CAP, I go out to clients' homes with a befriender. But it is almost like every time you're thinking, what's going to be behind that door? Now, I can tell you, like dogs, for some reason. I used to be somebody that was a bit scared of dogs, to be honest. Letty Groves has helped me a lot. But so many of them are staffies for some reason. I don't know why. But that's one thing, quite interesting. So what's it like when you go through that? Some of the homes will be just like yours and mine. You'd be quite happy walking in, it'd be quite recognisable. There are homes where I go in and there is no carpet on the floor, not because that choice and they want nice polished floorboards, because they can't afford carpet. They might be rated, they might be looking run down. As I said, quite often there'll be a dog or a cat or several pets. There may be piles of paperwork, quite often unopened, because if you're in debt, the easiest way to deal with it is not to deal with it. Put it in a corner and not open them. So if you open those letters from the bailiffs or the utility company and it's a red one at the top, that just adds to your stress. So you deal with it either by not opening the envelopes, stacking them away in the corner, or alternatively by putting them in the bin. So when I arrive, there is no paperwork. and that's even, just as difficult. Like Tina said on the video, you might get excuses. For example, we quite often take tea and coffee with us and milk because the client may not have any. They'll say, sorry, I've run out of milk. As basic as that. And then I will nearly always get an apology. It might start with, I should have managed better, or you'll think I'm stupid. Because they've got a sense of shame for asking for help. They feel isolated, they feel worried, they feel anxious. They might even be feeling real panic because they've just had a letter about an eviction notice or some other problem. So what we're aiming to do as CAP is not just to bring a route out of debt, but to offer hope, to beat that isolation, to come alongside them, offer friendship and offer God's presence. How old are clients? The youngest has been 19, the oldest is. Where do they work? Some are working full-time, some part-time, some are unemployed, usually because of health issues. They work in professional jobs, manual jobs, factories, care work, retail. So for example, I've had a university lecturer and as maintenance member staff at the university in Preston. Most of them live in rented accommodation, but some have their own mortgages. Debts, as I said, vary between about 3,000 and over 40,000. And there's many different situations. A lot of clients will have some sort of arrears in what we call priority debts. So that is rent, mortgage, council tax, utility bills, all the things that we need to keep a roof over our head. And those things have legal consequences. You can end up with court fines, you could even end up with imprisonment. And then some, but not all, will have what we call secondary debts. So that could be debts for online shopping, for car loans, for other hire purchase, and for payday loans. There'll be variations in pay and benefit. And one of the things I've found with clients is they struggle with is when your income comes at lots of different times. So you might have one partner that's got a monthly wage, one that's paid weekly, they might be on benefits that come weekly or four-weekly or like pensions do, or the new credit, universal credit comes monthly. And a lot of people are not used to, they've been used to a weekly benefit or weekly pay, so then to get universal credit every month, that is quite difficult to adjust to. And then a lot of clients do have health problems, and particularly mental health problems. I'm finding more and more people, it's not just stress, it is a diagnosed mental health condition. Some families, or individuals, they will turn to loan companies. They will get one loan to pay off other loans. Or they will turn to their parents or their grandparents. Mum and dad, the bank of grandma and granddad. But then they'll get to a position where they can't pay those back. And particularly if that's family, that is really difficult to deal with. Most clients have waited at least a year, sometimes up to 3 years, to contact CAP, and quite often the trigger is when they get a bailiff at the door threatened with eviction. Now some examples. I've had a single mother, at least one, I'm sure it's more than that, where the debts were actually their ex-partner's debts, but the ex-partner took the debts out in the wife or the woman's name. Although she didn't take the debts out, because they're in her name, she is liable, and then has to deal with all of that. I had one family who did have lots of different debts, but one of their debts was as simple as a TV licence. Now, there was a lot of complications with this, but when we boiled it down, it was because one year they had taken out an annual licence where they'd paid it all up front. The next year, he forgot to renew the licence. So we went online and started a new licence, which was a monthly payment one. Sounds fine, but there was a 3-month gap. So they owed their TV licence for that 3 months, but when the TV licensing authority looked at, they assumed that he hadn't renewed his licence because he'd not renewed the annual one, he'd taken out a new one. So he then got a court fine, taken to court, £200 court fine, plus all 3 months he owed, and it escalates. And in a lot of these cases, people do not have the capital or the savings to meet those debts. So if you get an extra fine, say pay £200 by Monday or pay your rent arrears by next week, people don't usually have that cash flow. So they end up robbing people to pay Paul. They'll pay the council tax this week, but that means you might get behind with the rent. Some other examples. I've got one young man in his 20s who has learning disabilities. He lives in supported accommodation. He's got great staff that look after him and the other people living in the house. But his way of dealing with his own stress and own mental health issues is to spend money online. It's really easy, isn't it? So whether you do online shopping, whether you do online gambling, other things, that relieves his stress for him at the time, just like others of us might do, just going a bit shopping, it makes us feel better. But the money all adds up. And because of his mental capacity, it is really difficult for him to deal with it. I've got another lady who is bipolar, so she's got manic depression. She finds it difficult even to leave the house or to make phone calls. So I go in and following the CAP procedure that she needs to open a new bank account and she needs to get hold of lots of paperwork. That, for her, feels like an impossible task. Going to a bank, having a conversation about setting up a new account is really difficult for her. And that is where the befrienders can come in and really walk alongside people. Some people, mainly younger men and women, who've been affected not just by mental health, but past or present involvement with cannabis and other drugs. And then one family I've been working with recently is both have been a real challenge, but also a really good news story. Next week it's Children in Need Week. And one of the things you'll be seeing is Big Bill DIY SOS. Do you know that programme? And the programme was filmed at Blackburn this year, so do watch it. But do most of you know the programme I'm talking about? You get a situation where you've got families that are in real problems and the house is not suitable for the needs. So we went in recently to a home and it just felt to me like I was walking into DIY SOS. Situation was the mother worked in a professional job. She had various conditions. Her children, 4 children, all in some way had a different either learning disability or physical or mental health problem. So it was already a difficult situation. But she then got struck down by a very limiting physical health condition. So she was now sleeping and living in the lounge on a pull-out sofa. She has not been upstairs for a year. Before she got the illness, she'd started decorating their rented house. So the hall had been partly stripped of all the wallpaper, there was no carpets, nothing. And there was work being done elsewhere in the house. So it was very like one of those SOS situations. The good thing was, she is incredibly resourceful. She's been contacting different charities, different health groups, finding benefits from her own profession, how they help people. So, for example, one of the local healthcare groups had found ways of giving her a carpet for the hall. So what we did from the CAP point of view, we've had a team in this week doing the decorating. So we've got the stripping off done, we'll be going back and eventually getting all the painting done. And our landlord is the one that's responsible for getting it all plastered. So that has been a good news story in the sense that although it felt a bit desperate, we are making a difference and other people in the community are making a difference. It's not just us. And so that family have now signed up for a debt plan. They are now working being out of debt. And what we can celebrate this year is we've already had 2 people, 2 families that have gone debt-free. Remember when we do the Mexican wave? Yeah? And there will be more in the future. For some people it happens within a year, some people it takes it. So hope is restored. People's lives are changed. Even after the first visit, some people say to me, I just feel so much better. They were so worried beforehand, but just by talking about it, by trying to deal with it, they are already feeling better. So not sure what we'll be facing, but we're ready to help that household exactly where they're at. It's not about going over the past or the causes of the debt. It's not about judging people. It's about helping to transform their situation. It's about giving them hope where there's been stress and anxiety and despair. It's about trying to show and share the love of God with them and how He values them. And it's about bringing the presence of Jesus into that home through prayer, beforehand, during and after. And the agents of transformation are you. Go on to the next. You as St. James, as John said in the video at the beginning, CAP always works through the local church. And I have a team of people that are involved. We've got about 17 befrienders now. We've new people joined us this year. We've got 4 money coaches, including myself. We've got other volunteers that help with decorating, etc. And then I've got some prayer partners. There are only, apart from the befrienders, there are only 7 people in the church at the minute who receive the occasional emails and prayer letters that I send out. I would love if there was lots more people signed up who would be we're going to be looking next one I think it is. Yeah, different ways you can be involved, but when we talk about praying, one of the courses we're going to be offering to people in the new year is the prayer course. We've been reading the book recently, and it is a really fantastic way. It talks about pray, P-R-A-Y, pause, rejoice, ask, yield. And, you know, you can go into that more as you do that course, but prayer is so important to everything we do. We need cover as we go in. We need prayer for the clients. We need prayer for ourselves. So you might be involved already in different organisations, with Food Bank, with Tier Funds, with other things, or with CAP. But you are a transformer, whether you're praying or whether you're actively doing it. And we really give thanks for that. So we're giving thanks for all that's gone before this year, the last 8 years. We're giving thanks for the lives that have been touched, for those that are already debt-free through the work of CAP, and for those that are still on the journey. We're giving thanks for everybody who's experienced the presence of Jesus as we go into the home and pray for them. And we're continuing to pray for our team, for the befrienders, the coaches, the volunteers. And I pray that you would be an answer to those prayers as well in some way. So we are responding, each of us, to what Isaiah heard and saying, here I am.